Welcome back to a new episode of The Future of. This is the space for those curious about the future. I'm Andrea Ferrante, and every week I tell you about the technologies, strokes of genius and discontinuities that could become big and shape the way we will live tomorrow. In this episode, 1. AI recruiting and bias. Personnel recruitment and selection travels fast towards the increasingly massive use of tools that claim to be AI-based, but contain very little artificial intelligence and moreover full of bias, with the added aggravation of a daunting lack of transparency. 2. Surveillance with Ring. Amazon's smart video intercom would represent the largest surveillance network on the planet, to which law enforcement would have warrantless access in the U.S. This sparks controversy and legitimate fears, which I'll tell you about. 3. 500 years of Captcha. To fill out the famous tests that prove you are human and not a bot, it takes 32 seconds on average, which for all users in the world is equivalent to a mountain of time. Cloudflare proposes an alternative solution. 4. The third thumb. A team of scientists teaches a group of volunteers to use a prosthetic thumb and discovers how the brain creates an image of it to integrate it into its functionality and adapt behavior. That's what happens when engineers and neuroscientists get together. 5. Patent troll. In the USA, finally a first case against an operator that uses its patents to make mass predatory lawsuits and close profitable economic deals to its benefit. Meanwhile, Europe is watching. Are you ready? Then hold on tight, fasten your seat belts, ready to go.
Silence, please.
AI recruiting and bias. On the market, there are about 1,000 softwares, which define themselves as based on artificial intelligence, dealing with personnel selection. Net of the usual ballet of figures and growth rates on the size of the pie, which vary from source to source and according to interest, we are talking about a market that is evolving rapidly, but essentially still quite small. Even if it were to exceed $1 billion in value in 2025, the crucial point is not how much it is worth, but how much it can potentially impact society. And that's because every company using such tools searches for and selects thousands of candidates. Beginning with some evidence from research firm Industry Arc, the phenomenon seems most prevalent in North America, particularly used in the financial services and insurance sectors, and dedicated to producing lists of potential candidates and doing initial screening. With modest results, many risks and a very clear preference on the part of people not to want to interface with machines. The risks are well known. It is enough to read a bit of technological literature to come across cases of software that discriminates along an infinite number of parameters: sex, race, age, skin color, and so on and so forth. The point is simple. Many facial recognition programs have been trained primarily with white faces, often with white men's faces, and when they go to work they bring this history with them. If a company has hired more white males in the past, the algorithm will be inclined to prefer them over, for example, black girls. Amazon, Uber, Microsoft, and many prestige companies have run into the mistake, just to name a few. Reactions have been of different kinds. Some manufacturers have revised their algorithms, trying to eliminate bias. Knowing that it is people, before algorithms, who have biases, I frankly wonder if there is a way to eliminate those biases from software. If there can exist a software that abstractly is completely free of biases. And I'm not talking about the more overt ones like gender, race, and age, but the more subtle ones that we often don't even realize ourselves. For example, when I was younger I had a very cool boss who was Irish and, for some reason therefore, I have a certain sympathy for people from that country. Or, I've always been fascinated by energetic and feisty people, while I tend to be more hesitant about introverts and those who speak little. While I don't choose a candidate solely on the basis of these personal experiences and preferences, I do believe that they influence my decisions in some way. If I have these flaws, How could an algorithm trained on my experiences do any better? Others have launched true blind interview services for candidates, where aspects of race, sex, and gender have been completely eliminated, and the focus placed purely on technical skills. It's too bad that, as we know, technical expertise is only one aspect and, often, relational expertise can be even more important. Still others have placed real people alongside to guard the algorithms. With the result that if companies thought they were automating certain processes, they still found themselves with the human bottleneck only further down the process. One category of operators instead tried to model a company's top employees, to look for similar candidates, forgetting that if the list of top people contained the same bias as any other dataset, because the company perhaps had hired mostly white males in the past, the problem obviously couldn't be solved. In other cases, there is software that tries to determine the emotions of candidates, and compares them to those of some ideal archetype. Well, I'll be very clear, these things are barely AI, and even if they were, they would be pretty useless. There are 3 types of AI: descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive. Descriptive gives us information about what's happening, predictive shows us a picture of the future, and prescriptive tells us what we should do based on those results. AI in hiring is still in the descriptive stage. Algorithms help recruiters find good candidates who may have slipped through their fingers, but how do we actually predict which of those candidates will do best in the job? You'd need to code that, too, and then feed it to the algorithms. And that would take a long time. In the meantime, some legislative fixes would be in order. First, inform candidates that they have been identified or discarded via an algorithm. How many companies would be willing to do this? Secondly, to have bodies that certify that the software used is free of bias, which would make some of the tools on the market disappear. Both Europe and the USA are moving in this direction. Europe with a focus on privacy. The USA with the idea of prohibiting the commercialization of inadequate tools. And what do you think? What would you propose to face the problem?
Surveillance with Ring. In previous episodes of The Future of, I told you about Chinese mass surveillance systems that use cameras with facial recognition software to track the movements and behaviors of millions of people. In the Western world, I also told you about the public and private camera systems that track vehicle license plates in the United States, and that raise similar concerns about privacy. Today it's Ring's turn. Technically, it's a video intercom from Amazon, which allows you to interact with the guest at your door from your smartphone or computer. Equipped with a camera that detects motion and excellent vision even at night, it is a seemingly innocuous gadget with a rather low cost, which has been sold in a few 100 million units. With a small subscription, it also allows you to record and store what its camera sees and records in the space in front of your house. And then there is a seemingly minor fact that is generating concern and controversy. Since Amazon purchased Ring in 2018, it has signed agreements making more than 1,800 partnerships with local law enforcement agencies, which can request video content recorded by Ring users without a warrant. That is, in just 3 years, Ring has connected about 1 in 10 police departments across the U.S., with the ability to access content recorded by millions of home security cameras inside private properties. In fact, in 2020 and through April 2021, U.S. law enforcement agencies have made more than 22,000 requests for access to content captured and recorded on Ring cameras. Because Ring cameras are owned by civilians, law enforcement is given a backdoor to access private video recordings of people in residential and public spaces that would otherwise be protected by the Fourth Amendment. By partnering with Amazon, law enforcement circumvents these constitutional and legal protections, and this has not been well received at all in the U.S. by the user base. The concerns of activists and scholars have been compounded by developments in facial recognition technology and other forms of machine learning that could conceivably be applied to Ring's recorded content and live feeds. Indeed, facial recognition technology has been widely denounced by artificial intelligence researchers and civil rights groups for its racial and gender biases. While Ring doesn't currently use facial recognition in its cameras, Amazon itself has sold this technology to police in the past, so concerns are mounting. You may not know that there is a blog, on the well-known Medium portal, titled Amazon Employees for Climate Justice, which collects the voice of Amazon employees about the most varied issues on which the American giant is engaged. One of the posts by a software engineer reads exactly these words: "The spread of connected home security cameras that allow for central interrogation of footage are simply not compatible with a free society. Privacy issues are not solvable by regulation, and there is no balance that can be achieved. Ring should be turned off immediately and never used again." Obviously, we can consider it as a personal opinion, and anyway, it's better not to be taken by hysteria or easy considerations on such delicate topics. But the fact that these massive technologies are actually in the hands of a big corporation that decides how to use them in full autonomy and for commercial purposes surely must turn on our attention.
"500 Years of Captcha." According to the well-known Cloudflare portal, humanity wastes about 500 years a day using this technology. What a crazy number, mind-boggling stuff. What Captcha is, you know very well. I'm pretty sure that in the last month, in order to access some site and prove that you're human, you've had to answer those ridiculous questions about how many bicycles, traffic lights, or crosswalks you see in the image. Now that's Captcha. Companies need a way to tell if an online user is human or not. Typically, these reasons involve security or the risk of abuse of some online service. At the turn of the century, Captchas were created to do just that. The first one was developed in 1997, and the term completely automated public Turing test to tell computers and humans apart was coined in 2003 by Luis von Ahn, Manuel Blum, Nicholas Hopper, and John Langford. And from there on, it has spread to become a commonly used tool. According to estimates by Cloudflare, which serves millions of websites and has a large and reliable database, it takes an average user 32 seconds to complete a Captcha test. Given that there are 4.6 billion internet users in the world, and assuming that a typical internet user sees about one Captcha every 10 days, the estimate is quickly made. Calculating backwards equates to about 500 human years wasted every day, just to prove our humanity. Well, and how can we do to avoid all this individual and cumulative time wasting? If you remember, I had already mentioned in the past a nice Italian startup that is working on the theme with even better features, but in our country talking about global technologies is always complicated. Where there is a big world player, a champion, things manage to proceed more quickly. The solution of the Cloudflare portal is, however, faster than the Captcha and requires a series of steps. To describe them seems a long thing. In reality, we are talking about a few seconds. From the user's point of view, a cryptographic attestation of human personality works as follows. The user accesses a website protected by cryptographic attestation of personality. A challenge is proposed to him. The user clicks on "I am human" and is asked for a security device. He decides to use a hardware security key, contained in a USB key that he inserts in his computer or connects to his phone for wireless signature. The attestation is sent to the site, which allows the user to enter. After the verification of the presence test, that is solved by pressing a button. Translated, you stick in a USB key and click a button. Maximum time 5 seconds. This verification is based on public and digital certificates. Public key cryptography provides a method of producing digital signatures that cannot be forged. A user generates a signature key that can sign messages, and a verification key that can be used by anyone to verify that a message is authentic. All with no cookies, no possibility of hacking along the system, and no intermediaries. Plus, of course, no one knows who pushed the button, because it doesn't matter. What's important is that there's a human behind it. Sure, you could imagine some mechanical device mashing the button, but objectively that seems like a fantasy to me. If instead there was also the recognition of the user, Andrea Ferrante, for example, the The only way to circumvent the system would be to point a gun to my head and force me to press the button, but this would be a scenario to think only in case of further evolution of the tool. For now we are still in the testing phase. Let's see if this approach can spread, because it is objectively interesting, and if it can work digitally, without necessarily going through a hardware to carry around, of course it would be even better.
The third thumb. If the study was not serious and published in the prestigious journal Science Robotics, I understand that the topic would be a bit funny. But it is really important to talk about augmented humans. Scientists have applied a robotic sixth finger to the hand of a volunteer, and found that it changes the way the hand is represented in the brain. The research team trained humans to use an extra robotic thumb, and found that they could effectively perform complex, right-handed tasks, including building a Lego-like block tower or holding a coffee cup, using the hand with the artificial appendage. As participants continued to train, they emphasized how they became increasingly comfortable with the new robotic part of their bodies. Notably, the third thumb, that's the name of the prosthesis, is completely 3D printed, which means that customization to the individual user's measurements is pretty quick and easy to accomplish. It's worn on the side of the hand, on the side opposite the flesh and blood thumb, side by side with the pinky. The wearer of the third thumb can control it via pressure sensors equipped on the feet, under the big toes. Connected wirelessly, the two-toe sensors manipulate the robotic thumb's movement, by reacting instantly to subtle changes in the toe's pressure on the sensor. The researchers gave a group of 20 people the robotic thumb, asked them to also use it at home for at least 6 hours a day, and then put them through hands-on tests. A second control group, on the other hand, was asked to wear a static robotic thumb, which remained motionless while performing the same tasks as the main group. Notably, brain scans of the participants revealed subtle but substantial changes in the way the hand augmented with a robotic thumb was represented in the brain's sensomotor cortex. Our brains represent each finger in a way that is distinct from all others, and after training the robotic finger, the new activity pattern corresponding to the new finger became more similar to the other natural ones. This means that the brain was building up an image of the presence and mode of operation of the additional finger. In fact, volunteers were able to use the thumb even when they were distracted, or even blindfolded, and reported a strong sense of the tool's presence. The English word used in the paper, embodiment, makes the idea much better than any other description. The fact that we learn and adapt is obviously not a surprise to anyone, but in the field of robotics it is relevant because it indicates how the joint work of engineers and neuroscientists is needed to improve the vast world of prosthetics, and how they can evolve to really become parts of us. And this is true both for those with disease, dysfunction, or lack of limbs, and for those who may need artificial extensions of the body to better perform certain tasks. After all, evolution didn't prepare us to use an extra body part, and we've come to realize that to extend our capabilities in new and unexpected ways, the brain will have to adapt the representation of the artificial tool to that of the biological body. A field that we have just begun to touch in that, however, could also teach us a lot about how we interact with any objects outside of us, increasing, for example, the safety, speed, or accuracy of our movements. Having something physically attached to the body and working in tandem with it is different, however. The results the researchers got here are closer to what we see in experienced pianists. Long-term training leads to changes in brain representation of the fingers. Here we even have an extra one. I leave you on the web page of the future of a video of a volunteer playing with the third thumb. Go watch it. I bet it will leave you quite surprised.
Patent troll. Who trolls are and what they do in the modern digital world, especially on social networks, is quite clear. But perhaps you do not know that there are trolls who apply particularly incorrect behavior, and unfortunately often very profitable, even in the world of patents. There is no single definition of patent troll. Sometimes patent pirate is used. It is a controversial term, susceptible to numerous definitions, none of which are considered satisfactory from the point of view of understanding how patent trolls should be treated in law. Definitions include a party doing one or more of the following: buys a patent, often from a bankrupt company, and then sues another company claiming that one of its products infringes the purchased patent. Enforces patents against alleged infringers without intending to manufacture the patented product or provide the patented service, often does not even have a manufacturing or research base. Enforces patent infringement rights against non-copiers. If we want to cut the definition down to the bone, we could say that a patent troll uses some patents in his availability to systematically sue everyone who uses some similar technology, with the purpose not so much to prevent them from using it, but to arrive at some kind of economic transaction to his advantage, such as granting a paid license or settling the lawsuit by getting paid something. For example, in the last few years, at least 10 companies in the state of Washington have been sued by a company called Landmark Technology A, which allegedly has a fairly generic patent on e-commerce, in what is known as a patent trolling case. According to the state attorney general's office, this predatory strategy uses bad faith patent claims to force small businesses to come up with quick cash settlements and close the case quickly, for fear of incurring additional legal fees, which in the U.S. is estimated to cost between $1 million and $2.5 million for a full defense. But Landmark may soon be repaid in its own coin. On Thursday, Landmark became the first company to be sued under Washington state's Patent Troll Protection Act, a 2015 law that was intended to crack down on patent trolls who harass and threaten small businesses with patent infringement claims. According to the prosecutor, Landmark Technology A's entire business model consists of demanding payment for licenses from other companies. Between January 2019 and July 2020, the company sent identical demand letters to nearly 1,200 small businesses across the country. The businesses were told they had infringed on a patent owned by LTA that covers a broad swath of e-commerce operations, and in many cases were threatened with litigation unless they awarded Landmark a $65,000 license. Just imagine how much the entire operation is worth if even a small percentage of the unfortunate 1,200 decided to come to some form of economic settlement. And don't think this is an isolated case. According to research published in 2012, so rather old, in that year at least 2,900 lawsuits in the U.S. were attributable to situations labeled as patent trolls. We can only imagine that 9 years later, the cases have substantially increased, given the constant digitization of the modern world. European literature reports a surge of cases also in our continent, especially between 2017 and 2018, with ICT companies put in the crosshairs and 60% of cases coming from the US, where the phenomenon precisely seems to have more solid roots. Among other things, given that the European economic and innovation setup is mostly composed of small and medium-sized companies, rather than legally well-equipped giants, it is easier for patent trolls to strike. And unfortunately, it seems that many companies prefer to pay up and remain silent, so it is also quite difficult to have an accurate track record of what happened and who is involved. Unfortunately, from a quick review of the literature, it seems that Europe is not yet well equipped from a legislative point of view to fight this phenomenon. Europe, what are you waiting for? Dear von der Leyen and esteemed members of the European Parliament, what are you waiting for?
Thanks for listening to The Future of Really. You could have listened to the radio, you could have spun a vinyl, you could have put on a cassette, you could have used a stereo 8 to know what it was, but instead you preferred The Future of. That's what I thank you for, and you still have hundreds of episodes left to discover. Sentence of the week. Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, "The only limit to our realization of tomorrow will be our doubts of today." Let us go forward with a strong and active faith.